It was my sister's wedding day, a grand event in every sense of the word. Glittering chandeliers, rows of extravagant floral arrangements, and an audience dressed to the nines made it clear that no expense had been spared. I stood awkwardly in a corner, clutching a glass of water, trying my best to stay invisible in a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. My parents had made it very clear that I didn't belong in this glittering spectacle of perfection. "You're lucky we even let you attend," my mother hissed under her breath earlier that day as I slipped into a simple dress. "We didn't want you embarrassing us in front of our guests." Her words stung, but I swallowed the pain. My parents had always been critical, but today, their contempt felt sharper. It wasn't just their disapproval. It was the outright humiliation that awaited me as the evening unfolded. The moment came during the wedding toast. My father took the microphone, standing tall and confident, and began to speak. "Today, we celebrate our beautiful daughter, Victoria," he said, his voice ringing with pride. "She has always made us proud, unlike—" His gaze swept toward me, and I froze, every nerve in my body screaming for me to disappear. "Unlike some people in this family who have done nothing but bring us shame." The room fell silent, save for a few gasps from the crowd. My cheeks burned as every pair of eyes turned toward me. It was a public flogging, one designed to remind everyone in the room of my failure in their eyes. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Instead, I clenched my fists and looked away, focusing on a distant point in the room as my father continued his toast, praising my sister's achievements while throwing more veiled insults my way. I wanted to run, but my feet felt like lead. Then I heard his voice, strong, calm, and cutting through the tension like a blade. "That's enough." The crowd parted as Liam stepped forward. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, his presence commanding and undeniable. My heart raced as he approached, his jaw set in a way that told me he wasn't about to let this slide. "Who are you to interrupt this?" my father snapped, his face flushed with anger. "I'm the man who loves your daughter," Liam replied, his voice steady but laced with an unmistakable edge. "And I'm here to make something very clear." The room was deathly quiet. Everyone, from the servers to the socialites, was watching intently. Liam stepped up to the stage, taking the microphone from my father's stunned grip. "You call her a disgrace," he said, his voice echoing in the vast hall. "But let me tell you what I see. I see a woman who's strong, resilient, and far better than any of you give her credit for." The murmurs began, but Liam wasn't finished. "You belittle her, humiliate her, but you don't see the heart she has or the kindness she shows to people who actually deserve it. You don't deserve her, and frankly, your behavior tonight is more of a disgrace than anything she's ever done." Couldn't breathe. The weight of years of silent suffering lifted with every word Liam spoke. My parents looked furious, my sister mortified, but for the first time I didn't care. Then Liam did something no one expected. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. He dropped to one knee, right there in the middle of the hall with every guest watching. "I love you," he said, looking up at me with a sincerity that brought fresh tears to my eyes. "And I don't care what they think. Will you marry me?" The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, cheers, and even protests from my parents, but none of it mattered. In that moment, all I could see was Liam, the man who stood up for me when no one else did. "Yes," I whispered, my voice shaking. 1,000 times, yes. The rest of the night was a blur. Liam's bold declaration had flipped the narrative, turning the focus from my parents' cruelty to the unexpected romance unfolding before their eyes. People who had looked at me with pity earlier now approached with congratulations, their shallow approval ringing hollow in my ears. But I didn't need their validation anymore. For the first time in my life, I felt free. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter. But it wasn't just a love story. It was a declaration of my worth, a reminder that I didn't need my parents' approval to be happy. And as for my parents, well, let's just say their desperate pleas for forgiveness would come sooner than I expected. The moment Liam slipped the ring onto my finger, the crowd erupted. Some cheered, others whispered behind their hands, but the deafening silence from my parents was what stood out the most. My mother's face was a mask of fury, her lips pressed so tightly together they turned white. My father, on the other hand, looked like he had been slapped in public, an expression of disbelief and barely contained rage. Liam stood, his hand firmly holding mine as he turned to face them. "It's clear you don't value her," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "But I do, and that's all that matters. Get out," my father barked, his voice trembling with anger. "You've embarrassed this family enough for one evening." Liam chuckled, his confidence unshaken. "Embarrassed? No, sir. I think you've managed that all on your own. I just gave her what she's always deserved. Respect." Before my father could respond, Liam pulled me toward the exit, his grip firm yet comforting. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and I felt a surge of power walking alongside him. For years, I had been the invisible daughter, the one cast into shadows while my sister basked in the spotlight. But tonight, Liam had made sure the world saw me, and not as a disgrace, but as someone worthy of love. When we finally left the venue, I was too overwhelmed to speak. Liam drove us to his apartment, a cozy space that felt more like home than my parents' mansion ever did. He handed me a glass of wine and sat beside me on the couch, his hand resting on mine. "Talk to me," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" "I don't even know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Part of me is relieved, but another part of me, I can't believe they did that. In front of everyone." Liam's eyes darkened with anger. "They've treated you like this for too long. Tonight was just the breaking point." I nodded, tears welling up again. "I don't know how to move forward from this. They're my parents, but how do you forgive something like that?" "You don't have to," Liam said firmly. "Forgiveness isn't something you owe them. You have every right to cut toxic people out of your life, even if they're family." His words lingered in my mind long after we went to bed. For the first time, I started to consider the possibility of a life without their constant criticism. A life where I could finally be myself without fear of judgment. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Most were from extended family members offering hollow apologies or trying to justify my parents' behavior. But the one message that caught my attention was from my sister, Victoria. "We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe on 5th at noon." Reluctantly, I agreed. When I arrived, Victoria was already seated, her usual air of confidence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like guilt. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry," she began, her hands clasped tightly around her coffee cup. "I didn't know they were going to do that. If I had, I would have stopped them." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because you've never exactly stood up for me before." Her face flushed. "I know, and I'm not proud of it. But last night, even I was shocked. It wasn't fair to you." I crossed my arms, leaning back in my chair. "Why now? Why apologize after years of letting them treat me like I'm less than you?" Victoria hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. "Because I realized something last night. No matter how much they've praised me, no matter how many times they've called me the perfect daughter, it doesn't mean anything if it comes at the expense of my sister." Her words caught me off guard, but I wasn't ready to forgive her just yet. "You're only saying this because Liam embarrassed them in front of everyone. If he hadn't, would you still be sitting here?" Victoria flinched, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. "Maybe not," she admitted. "But does it matter? I'm here now, and I want to make things right." I wasn't sure if I could trust her, but a small part of me wanted to believe she was sincere. "You have a lot to prove," I said finally. "Apologies are easy. Actions aren't." She nodded, her expression somber. "I understand. Just give me a chance, okay?" Over the next few weeks, Victoria's actions began to match her words. She started standing up to our parents, calling them out when they tried to demean me, and even reached out to Liam to thank him for what he did at the wedding. Meanwhile, my parents remained stubbornly silent. They didn't reach out, didn't apologize, nothing. It was as if they were hoping the whole situation would blow over, that I would crawl back to them like I always had. But this time I was determined to stand my ground. Weeks passed without a word from my parents. Their silence, though predictable, still stung. I couldn't shake the sense of being abandoned. Even if I had finally begun to accept that their love came with strings I was no longer willing to untangle. Liam, as always, was my anchor. He supported me through the whirlwind of emotions that followed the wedding, his unwavering presence reminding me that I wasn't alone. Still, a part of me yearned for closure, an apology, an acknowledgement, something from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. That closure came sooner than expected, though not in the way I'd hoped. One evening, as Liam and I were settling in for dinner, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my father. "We need to talk. Come home tomorrow. Noon." My stomach churned as I stared at the screen. There was no apology, no warmth, just a curt demand. Liam leaned over, reading the message, and frowned. "You don't have to go," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You don't owe them anything." "I know," I replied, my voice trembling. "But I need to hear what they have to say, even if it's just to confirm that walking away was the right decision." The next day, I arrived at my parents' house feeling like I was walking into a lion's den. The grand, cold mansion loomed above me as I stepped out of my car, memories of countless humiliations and criticisms flooding back with every step I took toward the door. My mother opened it, her expression unreadable. "You're late," she said, her tone sharp as ever. I bit back a retort and followed her into the living room, where my father was waiting. He sat in his usual chair, his posture stiff and his face set in a scowl. Victoria was there too, seated on the couch with a wary look on her face. "We wanted to discuss what happened at the wedding," my father began, his tone clipped. "Your behavior was unacceptable." "My behavior?" I blinked, stunned. "Are you serious right now?" I said, my voice rising. "You publicly humiliated me in front of all your guests, and you think my behavior was the problem? You disrespected this family by allowing that man to speak out of turn." My mother interjected, her voice cold. "And then to accept his proposal without even consulting us? Do you have any idea how that made us look?" "Made you look?" I repeated, incredulous. "This isn't about you. This is about how you've treated me my entire life. I've been nothing but an afterthought to you, a scapegoat for your frustrations while Victoria got all the praise." "That's not true," my father snapped. "We've always treated you fairly." I laughed bitterly. "Fairly? Is that what you call it? Publicly calling me a disgrace at my sister's wedding? That's fair." Victoria, to my surprise, spoke up. "She's right," she said quietly. "What you did was wrong. You crossed a line." My parents turned to her, stunned. "You're taking her side?" my mother asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. "It's not about sides," Victoria said, her voice gaining strength. "It's about admitting that you went too far. You owe her an apology." My father's face darkened. "I don't owe her anything," he said, his tone final. "She's been a disappointment since the day she was born." His words hit me like a physical blow. But this time I didn't break. Instead, I stood, my hands shaking with anger. "Thank you for making it clear where I stand in this family," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "I don't need your approval, and I certainly don't need your toxic version of love." I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, Victoria called after me. "Wait, I'm coming with you." Victoria's decision to leave with me was as shocking as it was validating. As we drove away from the house, she explained her reasoning. "I've spent my whole life trying to live up to their expectations," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But no matter how much they praise me, it's never enough. Watching how they treated you made me realize something. This isn't love. It's control. And I don't want any part of it anymore." Her words brought a lump to my throat. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in my fight to break free from our parents' suffocating grasp. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Victoria moved into a small apartment across the street from Liam and me, and our relationship began to heal. She apologized again, this time with a sincerity that left no room for doubt. Slowly, I started to let go of the resentment I'd harbored for so long. Liam, ever the supportive partner, encouraged me to focus on my passions, something I'd always been too afraid to pursue. With his help, I enrolled in a design course, a small step toward reclaiming my sense of purpose and identity. As I began to rebuild my life, my parents' attempts to regain control became more desperate. They sent letters, messages, even tried to involve other family members to guilt me into returning. But their efforts only strengthened my resolve. The turning point came when they showed up unannounced at Liam's apartment. What followed was a final, explosive confrontation that forced everyone to confront the ugly truth about our family dynamic. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Liam and I were enjoying a rare moment of peace, sipping coffee on the balcony, when the knock on the door shattered the tranquility. I glanced at Liam, confused. We weren't expecting anyone. When Liam opened the door, there they were, my parents. My father stood rigid, his expression stern, while my mother wore her signature mask of faux politeness. Behind them, 2 large suitcases sat on the ground, making their intent clear. They hadn't come for a casual visit. They were here to intrude. "What are you doing here?" I asked, stepping into the doorway, my voice tight with anger. "We need to talk," my father said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You've made some very poor decisions lately, and we're here to fix this mess." Liam crossed his arms, his protective stance beside me unwavering. "She doesn't need you to fix anything," he said coolly. "She's doing just fine without your interference." My mother scoffed, her eyes narrowing at Liam. "You're the reason she's spiraling out of control," she spat. "You've poisoned her against us." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Enough," I said firmly. "If you're here to lecture me or blame Liam, you can leave now." "We're here because we care about you," my father said, though his tone carried more authority than affection. "You're making a mistake cutting us out of your life. We're family." "Family?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what you call public humiliation and years of criticism? Because that's not my definition of family." "You're being overly dramatic," my mother snapped. "You've always been so sensitive." "That's because you've always been so cruel," I shot back. "You think you can show up here and guilt me into coming back? It's not going to happen." Liam stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "You don't get to come here and dictate her life anymore," he said. "She's not a child, and she doesn't owe you anything." My father's face turned red, his anger bubbling to the surface. "You have no right to speak to me that way, and you have no right to treat her like this," Liam countered. "You've spent years tearing her down, and now you're surprised she's finally standing up for herself?" I could see the frustration in my parents' eyes. They weren't used to being challenged, especially not by someone they considered an outsider. But Liam wasn't backing down, and neither was I. "You need to leave," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. "I've made my decision, and nothing you say will change it." My parents didn't leave quietly. As they packed their bags back into the car, my mother hurled one final barb. "Don't come crawling back to us when he leaves you. You'll regret this." Her words stung, but I refused to let them see it. "I won't regret choosing happiness over your approval," I said, my voice unwavering. "Goodbye." As they drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of liberation. For the first time, I had drawn a line they couldn't cross. With my parents finally out of the picture, I focused on the people who truly mattered. Victoria had become an unexpected ally, and her support was instrumental as I navigated this new chapter of my life. One evening, as we sat on her balcony overlooking the city, she opened up about her own struggles with our parents. "I always felt like I had to be perfect," she admitted, her voice tinged with sadness. "They made me believe that if I didn't meet their expectations, I wasn't worthy of their love." Her confession brought tears to my eyes. "I always thought you were their favorite," I said softly. "I wasn't their favorite," she replied. "I was their project. And now I see how much it cost me. And you." Our bond deepened as we shared stories and supported each other. For the first time, I felt like I had a sister, not a rival. The months that followed were transformative. I threw myself into my design course, discovering a passion I never knew I had. Liam was my biggest cheerleader, always encouraging me to dream bigger and aim higher. One night, As we sat on the couch going over my latest project, he turned to me with a serious expression. "You've come so far," he said. "I'm so proud of you." His words brought a lump to my throat. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. "You didn't need me," he said, smiling. "You've always had this strength in you. You just needed to see it for yourself." While my life was moving forward, there was still a lingering sense of unfinished business with my parents. Though I had no intention of letting them back into my life, I felt the need to confront the pain they had caused one last time. Victoria offered to come with me, and together we planned a meeting that would finally lay everything on the table. The decision to meet my parents one last time wasn't an easy one. Every fiber of my being screamed to leave the past buried, but I knew I needed closure. Not for them, but for myself. Victoria insisted on coming with me, her presence a silent promise that I wouldn't face this battle alone. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe far from the familiarity of their mansion. The setting was ordinary, but the tension in the air was anything but. When my parents arrived, their expressions were unreadable. Though my father's jaw was set in the way I recognized as barely concealed anger. We sat down, an uneasy silence stretching between us. Finally, my father spoke. "So what is this about?" he asked, his tone clipped. "This is about the damage you've done," I said, my voice steady but firm. "And it's about letting you know that I'm done being the punching bag in this family." My mother scoffed, leaning back in her chair. "Is that what you think? That we've been cruel to you?" "I don't think it," I replied sharply. "I know it. You've spent my entire life making me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I was a disappointment. And at Victoria's wedding, you made sure the whole world knew it." "That's not how we saw it," my father said, his tone defensive. "We were frustrated. Yes, but we've always had your best interests at heart." "Best interests?" Victoria interjected, her voice incredulous. "You humiliated her in front of hundreds of people. How is that in her best interests?" My mother's eyes flicked to Victoria, her surprise evident. "You're taking her side?" "I'm taking the side of what's right," Victoria shot back. "You've spent years pitting us against each other, and I won't be part of it anymore." For a moment, my parents were silent, clearly taken aback by Victoria's defiance. Then my father leaned forward, his expression softening just enough to seem genuine. "We didn't realize you felt this way," he said. "We only wanted the best for you." "That's not true," I said, refusing to let him manipulate the conversation. "You wanted control. You wanted perfection. And when I didn't fit your mold, you decided I wasn't worth your love." My mother's lips thinned, but she didn't deny it. "You always misunderstood us," she said finally. "We only pushed you because we saw potential." "You pushed me because you wanted a version of me that didn't exist," I corrected. "And in doing so, you destroyed any chance of us having a real relationship." The conversation continued, each word peeling back layers of unresolved pain. Victoria and I stood united, refusing to let them deflect or minimize their actions. By the end of the meeting, my parents were visibly shaken, their confidence eroded by the weight of the truths we had laid bare. "We're not asking for your forgiveness," I said as I stood to leave. "We're asking for you to take responsibility for what you've done. If you're willing to do that, maybe one day we can rebuild something. But until then, this is goodbye." Walking out of that cafe felt like shedding a weight I'd carried my entire life. For the first time, I felt free, not just from their expectations, but from the fear of losing their approval. Victoria and I walked in silence for a while before she finally spoke. "That was brave," she said. "I don't think I could have done that without you." "You're stronger than you think," I said, smiling at her. "We both are." The weeks following that meeting were transformative. Without the shadow of my parents' judgment looming over me, I threw myself into my work and my relationships. My design course became a source of pride, and with Liam's encouragement, I began freelancing for small businesses, creating logos and branding that allowed me to showcase my creativity. Victoria, too, was finding her footing. She started therapy, something neither of us had ever considered growing up in a family that viewed vulnerability as weakness. Slowly, she began to heal from the pressures of perfectionism, and our bond grew stronger with each passing day. Surprisingly, the fallout from the confrontation brought unexpected allies. Extended family members who had witnessed my parents' behavior reached out, offering apologies for not stepping in sooner. While their words didn't erase the past, they served as a reminder that I wasn't alone. One evening, as Liam and I sat on the balcony watching the sunset, he turned to me with a smile that made my heart skip a beat. "You've come so far," he said, his voice full of pride. "I think it's time we start building our future." I laughed, glancing at the ring already on my finger. "I thought we already were." "I mean officially," he said, pulling out a second ring. This one a simple band with our initials engraved inside. "Let's set a date." Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. "Yes, let's." The announcement of our wedding plans brought a new wave of emotions. While my parents remained distant, Victoria stepped into the role of maid of honor with enthusiasm, determined to make the day a celebration of love and resilience. The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of excitement, nerves, and unexpected moments of healing. Victoria threw herself into her role as maid of honor, helping with everything from venue selection to dress fittings. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that I thought had been lost forever. One evening, as we sorted through color palettes and floral arrangements, she turned to me with a hesitant smile. "You know," she began, "I've always envied you." I blinked, caught off guard. "Me? What's there to envy?" "You've always been real," she said, her voice soft. "You didn't pretend to be someone you're not, even when it meant standing alone. I've spent my whole life trying to be perfect for them, and all it got me was emptiness." Her confession broke my heart. I reached out, squeezing her hand. "You don't have to be perfect anymore," I said. "We're free now." As the guest list grew, the inevitable question arose. Should we invite my parents? Liam, ever the voice of reason, left the decision to me. "It's your day," he said, his hand resting gently on mine. "If you want them there, we'll make it work. If not, that's okay too." After days of deliberation, I decided to send them an invitation. Not as a gesture of forgiveness, but as a way to offer them one last chance to show they cared. Whether they accepted or not would speak volumes about where they stood. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a reply from my parents. It wasn't a phone call or a heartfelt letter, just a cold, formal RSVP confirming their attendance. I couldn't help but wonder if they were coming out of genuine remorse or a desire to save face. Victoria, ever the optimist, tried to see the silver lining. "Maybe this is their way of trying," she suggested. "Even if it's not perfect, it's a step." I nodded, though my heart remained guarded. The wounds they'd inflicted were still fresh, and I wasn't ready to trust them just yet. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the perfect backdrop for the most important day of my life. As I stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a gown that made me feel like a queen, a wave of emotions washed over me. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who felt invisible, unworthy, and marveled at how far I'd come. Victoria entered the room, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You look amazing," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "So do you," I replied, taking in her elegant maid of honor dress. "Thank you for being here. For everything." She smiled, pulling me into a tight hug. "You deserve this happiness," she whispered. "Don't ever forget that." The ceremony was everything I dreamed of. Intimate, heartfelt, and filled with love. As I walked down the aisle toward Liam, I felt a sense of peace I'd never known before. He stood there, his eyes filled with unwavering love, and I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. But the reception brought its own challenges. My parents arrived late, their presence casting a shadow over an otherwise perfect day. They kept their distance, watching from the sidelines as Liam and I shared our first dance, their expressions unreadable. When they finally approached, it was during a quiet moment as Liam and I stood by the balcony, taking in the view. My father cleared his throat, drawing my attention. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was an awkward pause before my mother spoke. "We wanted to say, we're sorry for everything." Her words caught me off guard. I searched her face for sincerity and saw a flicker of something that looked like genuine regret. I appreciate that, I said slowly, but words aren't enough. If you truly want to make amends, it's going to take time and effort. They both nodded, their expressions somber. We understand, my father said, and we're willing to try if you'll let us. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. My parents kept their distance, respecting my boundaries, while Victoria shone as the life of the party. Liam's family embraced me wholeheartedly, their warmth and acceptance filling the void my parents had left behind. As the night drew to a close, Liam and I stood on the dance floor, surrounded by friends and family who had become our true support system. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. This is just the beginning, he whispered. Our beginning. I smiled, my heart swelling with love and gratitude. I can't wait to see where it takes us. And as the music played and the stars glittered above, I knew I had finally found my happily ever after. Not just in Liam, but in myself.